Hello and welcome to Women of the Middle East podcast. This podcast relates the realities of Arab women and their rich and diverse experiences. It aims to present the multiplicity of their voices and wishes to break overdue cultural stereotypes about women of the Middle East. Season 5 is a collaboration between Musawah and Women of the Middle East podcast. As we will be discussing Musawah's latest book, Justice and Beauty in Muslim Marriage Towards Egalitarian Ethics and Laws, published by One World Academic in December of 2022. My name is Amal Malki. I'm a feminist, scholar, and an educator. This is Women of the Middle East podcast. Hello and welcome to Season 5 of Women of the Middle East podcast. This season is dedicated to discussing the groundbreaking book, Justice and Beauty in Muslim Marriage. We begin with the first section of the book titled The Qur'an. This section is made up of 3 chapters. Authors of these chapters argue for moving beyond pre-modern interpretations of the Qur'an that perpetuate patriarchal ethics and instead emphasize centering the Quranic ethical worldview of justice, beauty, and goodness in line with the realities of the 21st century. We are very lucky to have 2 of the authors who contributed to this section, Dr. Omaima Abou-Bakr and Nur Rofiah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
I would like to begin by asking you about your contribution and the importance of your contribution to this book in terms of both professional, of course, growth, but also personal reasoning, given that you're both Muslim women who've, of course, been a part of that context that perpetuates the inferiority of women in marriages in Islam. Dr. Omaima, shall we begin with you?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you. This is a very good question indeed, because I think I speak for, first of all, my 2 colleagues in the chapter, Dr. Asma Ramrabit and Dr. Morki Shermani, also the others. And you put it rightly when you said it was both professional and a personal project as well. It was a professional because this is an academic research that we all worked on and researched and wrote and analyzed. But we all have, most of us have a personal investment also in the topic. We are, after all, Muslim women, and this is our cause. So it was also important to us personally and spiritually to sort these things out during the writing process.
Definitely. And Noor, you're a scholar, but also an activist. Tell me, how important was this project for you?
Yes, this project for me is like a part of a life journey, because I know Musawah very well, and also I have involved in Musawah's other project like research on Kiwamah and Wilayah as 2 key concepts of gender relation in Muslim family, and also in Musawah knowledge building course. I even believe that Musawah has given a big impact to women's hakiki justice concept that I use in this book. So I saw this project as an opportunity to examine my ability to use women's hakiki justice to unlearn the old concept of marriage in Muslim societies, which is gender bias, and to relearn the new concept of marriage in Islam, which must be just to women as wife, mothers, daughters, and others in Muslim family.
Dr. Omaima, the chapter you contributed to is Quranic Ethics of Marriage. This chapter sets an overarching Quranic interpretation framework for marriage consisting of interconnected ethical principles. Can you tell us more about the main points of this chapter?
We try to begin with outlining a specific methodology in addressing the verses on marriage and divorce, but not just the verses, it's the whole Quranic what we believe is true Quranic vision of marriage, as Dr. Nur was saying, to undo perhaps decades and centuries of understanding marriage as a hierarchical system, right? As a hierarchy. We try to first to point out the gaps that we saw in classical tafsir tradition, and then put forth our methodology, which is really based on 2 important things: on more of a holistic approach. In other words, tying the verses together, tying the surahs together, and not just the verse, not just the individual verses and the surahs here and there, but the reason we call it holistic because it's all interconnected. Holistic and ethical, that's the second pillar. What does it mean, ethical? That we have to take seriously the Quranic ethical principles, the egalitarian ethos of the Quran, of justice and equality and non-hierarchical relations. We have to take these main ethical principles of the Quran seriously and apply them to gender relations, particularly in marriage.
You have uncovered some important gaps in the classical tafsir tradition. Why was this holistic approach towards interpretation absent in that time period? Why haven't we seen that through the mufassirin back then?
Yeah. Of course, when we say the absence of a total, comprehensive, holistic approach, we don't mean to make a generalization about that aspect, because of course the mufassirin did a fantastic job in everything, and they were aware, particularly linguistically and also on the level of ahkam rulings. Of course, they were aware of how all the verses are tied in a particular cause or a subject. But we claim that when it came to gender, this vision of holism, or this vision of applying principles to understanding the ahkam, wasn't really perfect, right? And that was the main gap. And when it came to gender, or the marriage and divorce ahkam, you were asking about what is the reason. The main reason is, of course, the patriarchal culture and the patriarchal outlook that they all were part of, and this is not their fault, right? They were just part of that age. They couldn't see. Perhaps that's what we claim. Egalitarian ethos of the Quran should have been taken seriously and should have been taken as an incentive to change societies. So that was part of it. That was part of the reason why they couldn't see that or apply that all the time.
Definitely, and I truly believe that there were enlightened and more holistic interpretations back then, but the dominant discourse that have reached us is one that has become the dominant, the mainstream, that feeds into specific agendas of patriarchy. But what do you think? Do you agree with me?
Yes, of course. The bias, of course, and hierarchy. There was this always the view that, well, men are better than women. They have more capabilities, they're more rational, they're really addressed more by God subhanahu wa ta'ala, not women, not females. And of course, Dr. Nur has a lot to say about that, that's not really the case at all. Women are part of humanity that Quran addresses, right? So you're right in the sense that this is one of the reasons why we still struggle with some interpretations of qiwama as authority, of ta'a as absolute obedience to the husband, because this is in return of the nafaqa. All of these things that really need to be unpacked or unlearned, as Dr. Nur was saying. We need to unlearn all these concepts and think of them anew.
Dr. Nur, so you've authored a chapter called Reading the Quran Through Women's Experiences. The title is beautiful. And the chapter offers a holistic reading that recognizes women's underlying historical marginalization and physical experiences and charts a trajectory towards gender justice. Tell me more about it.
Women Hakiki justice starts from a belief that in Islam, women are full human. So it means that women are not only physical, but also intellectual and spiritual human being as men. And the second one, we also believe that women are the primary ruler on earth, or Khalifa fil ard. So women cannot be longer seen as the secondary ruler. In Islam, both men and women are primary ruler on earth. Starting from this, we believe that men are neither the single standard of women humanity nor their justice. This means that we have to take women's experiences as human that men don't have into consideration in understanding Islam, especially these two experiences. One, bodily experiences. Because of the reproductive system, women will experience 5 bodily experiences that men don't have. Menstruations in weeks, and the impact of this is other or painful. Pregnancy in months, 9 months, and then baby delivery in hours or days, nifas in weeks or months, and breastfeedings in years or 2 years. And their impact are Qur'an, tiring, even wahnan ala wahnin, or multiple painful and tiring. Let's compare with the role of men bodies in humans reproduction, which is only producing sperm in minutes, even seconds, and the impact is joy. So what we call maslahah in Islam, it cannot add any pain of women's bodily experiences. And the second one is women's social experiences because of the patriarchal system that value women lower than men. This causes women socially are in high risk to be treated unjustly based on gender, especially in these 5 forms. 1, stigmatization, marginalization, subordinations, violence, and double burdens. Women's hakiki justice require to neither add the pain of women's bodily experiences nor contain or cause any form of gender-based injustice against women, even when men will never feel these bodily and social pains. So men are no longer become the single standard of women's humanity and women's justice. This is very important because since men don't experience those kind of experiences, they don't know the pain. Since they don't know, they think that this kind of experiences don't exist. Meanwhile, we know that men are still dominating in the as the decision makers in marriage, family, society, state, even in the global levels. So when they are dominating decision-making places and they don't take this kind of experiences of women into consideration, we cannot hope that the justice in the men's perspective that ignore the woman's experiences will be the hakiki justice to women.
Very interesting how, you bring those experiences from the periphery and put it and centralize it within this context. And I don't think this has been done before. This leads me to the second question to you, Dr. Nur. How has this approach been successfully adopted in activism around the Muslim family law reform in Indonesia?
Of course, this approach is not a single approach. This approach, together with other approaches like Mubadalah, done by Faqihuddin Abdul Qadir in Indonesia, and also Ma'ruf concept by Badriah Fayumi, also from Indonesia, and other approaches in Indonesia. We trying and use this approach in Ministry of Religious Affairs National Training Module on Marriage Guidance for Prospective Brides and Grooms. So we have national training and use module that we build together the module and use this approach. And the second one, we also use this approach to the concept of maslahah family belongs to Nahdlatul Ulama. This is the largest Islamic organization in Indonesia. They also will train the members in national level using this concept and this approach. So the concept of Maslahah family also use this approach. And the third one, this is also important. This approach also used as the advocacy for policymakers, especially through Indonesian Women's Ulama Congress fatwas. For example, the fatwa on the obligation of family, society, and state to protect children from marriage. This fatwa has been one of the legitimation to increase the minimum age of women and men from 16 years old for girls and 19 for boys to 19 years old for both. And also the fatwa on prohibition of sexual violence, both inside and outside marriage, also has been used to advocate law of criminal act of sexual violence. This is some impact of our fatwa, use the women's hakiki justice as one approach among other approaches.
It's amazing to see that in Indonesia, they managed to reform the family law from within through an Islamic perspective lens. Dr. Omaima, going back to you, you speak about how the Qur'an's egalitarian ethics of marriage is formulated within 3 interconnected circles. What are those circles?
Yes, this was part of our methodology in approaching particular topics in the Quran. But the idea, the methodology is before you jump into whatever verse on and treat it as a separate and isolated unit, you need the conceptual framework, and that is very important. So that's why we thought or we devised of these interconnected circles or these concentric circles where you need these concepts before you enter the verse. The first circle, of course, is the concepts of al-nafs al-wahida, al-zawjain. يعني if people look at the first verse of Surah An-Nisa, الآية الأولى من Surah An-Nisa, it just gives you the map. It gives you that first circle of basic ontological equality of humanity, of human beings, of the two zawjan, of the two pairs of human beings, and the importance of taqwa, as you know, again, the ethical foundation that, I mean, if you look at that, this is the ethical foundation that is supposed to govern all our interpretations of all the ahkam, of all the rulings. So the first circle is the basic ontological quality and the matching pair is zawjain. No hierarchy. I don't know where we got the idea of hierarchy or of superiority and inferiority. No, basic equality and ontological equality and moral agency of both, of men and women, in vis-a-vis God subhanahu wa ta'ala, their responsibility and how they are matching pairs. So it's really important that you begin addressing gender or gender relations in marriage from that in first conceptual inception, so to speak. The second one would be, of course, the al-mithaq al-ghaliz. People, again, don't take that very seriously. It's a solemn bond, right, that was used in the Quran to refer to the bond between the prophets and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how serious a commitment is that, right? It's not something to be taken into jest, but it's almost something that's ethical, that's moral, that's spiritual, to be taken seriously. It's like having a solemn bond for both men and women with God subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The third, and then we go into the specific ethical principles, also all Quranic principles. al-ma'ruf, al-ihsan, al-mawadda, al-rahma, of course, that famous definition, the famous foundational Quranic and Islamic definition of marriage, people don't take seriously. Our whole project is, please take these ethical principles seriously, the mawadda, the rahma, the affection and the mercy, al-ma'ruf, al-ihsan. Most the occurrences of ma'ruf and ihsan, particularly these two values or two principles, you will find them, their most occurrences are in the verses about marriage and its rulings, or divorce and its rulings. And that is something to think about. Yani God subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us something definitely about application. Yeah, the problem is people will talk about that, but they don't apply it, whether in the interpretation or, of course, in their conduct. And that's part of the reform that you talked about, Dr. Amal, in the personal status law and the family laws. So these are the three main circles. And then we go in the second part of the paper to specifics, to the interpretation, right? Of interpretations of things like the dowry, the nafaqa, the maintenance, spousal relations, divorce, discord, qiwama, ta'anu. These are all the specifics that people jump to right away, and we're asking them, please look at the ethics, look at these different levels, and make that have a bearing, a very serious bearing on the verses, the ayah.
Beautiful, yes. What do you think the book will achieve? And how can we capitalize on the knowledge in this book to achieve more?
Yeah. This is a very important and practical question, because we do want to move to the level of activism, of reform, of actual reform in all our societies. This book, of course, this is the second sort of part of the project. Musawah began with the book on qiwama, which was the big stumbling block, and this is also very important. The reason we're all very happy with it, because this book provides alternatives, because the criticism to feminists in general, or particularly Muslim feminists, is that you're deconstructing, you're pulling things down, you're criticizing, you're not providing alternative. No, we are, we are providing new alternatives in perspectives, the idea of dissemination, translating this book. There is an Arabic translation, by the way, that is coming out this next month, and the launch. So translating, disseminating, launching, using it in activism and training, as Dr. Nur was saying. I mean, it's a document. That takes time, but you're right. This is not purely an academic exercise. No, we want to have this as a document that we can use in activism, in reform, in having dialogue with our religious institutions and religious ulama also who feel they have legitimacy, and they do, but we want their help and their solidarity to help put all these interpretations into effect and reform.
Dr. Nur, I'm going to ask you the same question. What would you hope this book achieves, and how can we work further on disseminating this knowledge, activating activism around the book?
We believe that the root of injustice is not in reality, but in mind. Our worldview, for example, will give big impact to the reality, including how we see women's humanity. Are we considering women's experiences as human experiences or not? Will drive you to treat women in just or unjust ways. And also, what is important in mind is the knowledge system, including Islamic knowledge system. If we see women as the source of fitnah, for example, then it will give impact to the fatwa that you produce. So this book, I think, help us to change our mindset, how to see women as full human, not only as sexual or physical human being, but also intellectual and spiritual human being. So don't see women as men's sexual tools or men's reproductive machines, because we are full human, has intellect and also spirit. I think this book helped us to also change our Islamic knowledge, starting from this awareness of women's humanity. We want to translate this book into different languages, including Indonesians. So it can be read by Indonesian scholars and give an alternative interpretation of Islam, especially in family and marriage issues that give justice not only for men but also for women, as a mother, as wife, daughters, and etc. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I hope that also our collaboration on Women of the Middle East podcast contribute to doing that, shedding light on the Islamic feminist movement in general and the production of this movement, one of which is this amazing book that would definitely contribute to changing the mindset. Although we say changing mindset, beliefs and social norms take some time, but I believe that with education, with raising awareness, people will start listening to us. Dr. Omaima, Dr. Nur, thank you so much. It was lovely to have you on Women of the Middle East podcast.
You're most
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Season 5. To stay up to date with Women of the Middle East podcast, you can subscribe and don't forget to rate us. If you would like to contact me directly, you can do so on Instagram or Twitter or via email.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.